the Jews and, man, that was great till just now. And Peter and all that. And we finally made it to the place in Acts, though, the portion of Acts where the gospel's finally getting out to the uttermost. And that's super important. I'm really grateful for that because I felt like we were in Jerusalem and Judea, like that's all we was dwelling in for a very long time. We finally made it to Samaria, and now we're going to the uttermost parts of the earth. And that is the key verse in the book of Acts, Acts 1 and verse number 8, that the gospel would get to Jerusalem, Judea, and to the uttermost parts of the earth. And so it's the commission. Now, in Acts chapter 13, we're primarily, from here on out, we're going to deal with 3 documented missionary journeys of Saul. And what we understand in Acts 13, another super important thing is this is where Saul becomes known as Paul. This is where he becomes known as Paul. Verse number 9, we dealt with that just a little bit last week. Then Saul, who is called Paul. And from here on out, we never see him called Saul anymore. He's not referenced as Saul anymore. And so Paul's now, he's in the business of having a name change. And Paul's going about to take the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. And this missionary journey that he was on started with some opposition, okay? We dealt with a little bit of that understanding a couple of weeks ago. And then last week, we dealt with the fact that they come face to face with some real spiritual warfare, nearly right off the rip, right off the bat. They find some spiritual warfare. And what we learned last week is that's true for all of us. That we're all going to face spiritual warfare, and that none of us are immune to spiritual warfare. And so I think we seen last week, we took some time and we dealt with John Mark and some potential struggles that John Mark may have had as he was presented with this idea of a missionary's life. Okay, there's 3 things that could have aided in John Mark's derailment. It affected John Mark. And we dealt with spiritual warfare. We dealt with the physical demands of that life. And then we just dealt with the immaturity of John. Okay, so 3 kind of things that we believe that could have affected John. And so I want you to understand that those same things will affect us. And the battle sometimes is just too intense for some of us. And we back away. We get away. And for some of us, maybe in here right now, we're facing some personal attack. We're facing some personal spiritual attack that we just can't get over. And what ends up happening for those of us in the room that face spiritual attack that we can't get over, if you sit in immaturity for so long, you'll eventually be tossed about to and fro with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you stay in bondage to your immaturity, your effectiveness for the mission will be stifled. And so God's give you a church that believes in discipleship. God believes in a church that believes that we can train you and that God can use you for the glory of God and make you an effective minister. And you will be an effective minister if you decide you want to be. Okay, you don't have to decide to be that, but if you decide you want to be an effective minister. And I'm really grateful for those in the room that counted the cost of being an effective minister. And they decided to bear down. Hey, we've got things to do. We've got a mission before us. We've counted the cost. The mission is too great. We have to focus on ministry. We have to get our lives in line with the gospel. And so in faith, we say yes to the Lord. Yesterday was a great testament. Yesterday was a great testament to that. That effective evangelism is actually taking root and taking hold in some of our lives. And prayer ministry on Wednesday night. Man, we've sought the Lord and we've asked the Lord to, God, help us overcome the fear of men. We know the fear of man brings a snare, and help us overcome that fear and give us boldness and give us the opportunity to give the gospel. And listen, I'm seeing more doors open in my life right now because we've got serious about prayer. And so I want to say I'm really grateful for those of us that have decided to embark on our own missionary journeys in our own communities. And we've gotten serious about getting the gospel out there. Now, today, we're not going to finish this sermon, but we are going to get down the sermon that Paul's preaching here. We're not going to finish that. But we are going to get down to verse number 41, and we're going to see that Paul's that Paul's effectiveness in communicating God's word had some reasons behind it. Paul's effectiveness in communicating God's word had some effectiveness behind it because there's some reasons, okay? There's some actual reasons why Paul was effective. And I want you to get this because some of us may miss this part. If you don't understand there is some reasons why you're not effective, you may miss out on some reasons why you could be effective. And so, Paul's a great model for us, okay? Now, this is the first recorded sermon of Paul. We know this is not the first sermon Paul ever preached. Paul's been preaching sermons since Acts chapter number 9, but this is the first one that Paul's actually, that's actually penned down by the Apostle Paul. And it's a model, in my opinion, as you and I seek to invest God's word in others, whether that be through a sermon, whether that be at Bible and breakfast, whether that be sitting down one-on-one across somebody's kitchen table, whether that be at the coffee shop, or whether that is having a conversation with somebody in the park. Whatever that looks like, I want you to understand that this is a good layout for what our effectiveness could look like if we'll just get some simple keys down. And before we get to the text, I want you to see what's actually happened so far. Paul and Barnabas, they've been sent out from the church in Antioch. They leave from the port town of Seleucia and they come to the eastern border of the Mediterranean Sea. And now they're on their way to Antioch in Syria, okay? And they sail to the island of Cyprus, where Barnabas is originally from. And on that island, they run into this sorcerer. We looked at that last week. But they get through that, and they keep moving. They sail north to Perga. They get to Perga, which now is modern-day Turkey. And this is kind of where we pick up the story. They continue to move inland north into what we know as Galatia. Now, Galatia is actually a very large area. And so what you're going to find, the book of Galatians, chapter 1 and verse number 2, and all the brethren which are with me unto the churches of Galatia. I think sometimes if what we don't know, we just don't know. And I think sometimes we think that there was just one church in Galatia, and they're just writing to the Galatians, but there's